Dude, I just sacrificed my whole life for what I believed at the time, my country. And now I'm just like this broken, worn out, empty, lost ship in the night. And during that time, my buddy called me. He said, John McAfee's going to call you. He said he wants the best SEAL out there. Well, I wasn't the best SEAL. I had just got out. And I was like, well, why not? You know,
the documentary that's out, is that one pretty accurate?
No.
It didn't seem like it.
That documentary was basically about John McAfee's crazy paranoid life after I left him. But I was with him during the apex of his entire career, I would say. And that's when he took me in pretty short notice and started teaching me everything that he knew and started doing his negotiations for him, started doing all of his business deals, started making him a ton of money. And it was very easy to do his negotiations for him because it was a very set parameters. You know, the easiest negotiation is non-negotiable. In the morning, he always would bust through the door and say, get up, you know, give me a cigarette. And he didn't do that. And then I got up because something wasn't right. And I walked over to the door and I like cracked it open.
You gotta tell me more about this now. You left me, you're gonna leave everybody hanging on that one.
I know.
First of all, thank you for doing this, man. When I read your bio, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy has been through it. So,
brother,
it's impressive. It's impressive. And just having you, I mean, when I see stuff like that, just having you alive, I mean, seriously, like just being here alive and being able to tell your story is got to be such a blessing. And I was just blown away. And then I tried to do some homework and watch some of your older podcasts and it's very impressive. So I'm looking forward to this.
I appreciate you having me on, brother. Yeah, my mom always tells me, you know, she's just glad that I'm alive or not in prison, you know, because it's been a rough go, you know.
Yeah.
It's been a long journey, you know, to get here. But I just appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, So let's just dive in on this long jersey. I mean, we were just talking about Joe Rogan talking about McAfee, and I wanted to ask you. So the documentary that's out. That's on Netflix, right? The McAfee. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that one pretty accurate, or did they didn't seem like it?
No, man. I was
seemed like they left out a lot.
Yeah, I've been so disappointed with the documentaries. In fact, Running with the Devil is that one, right?
Yeah.
They reached out to me, but I was on house arrest, you know, and I think I was in federal pen at the time, FMC. And so when they try to reach out to me, so I don't blame them for that, but that documentary was basically about John McAfee's crazy paranoid life after I left him, you know, and he had a lot to be paranoid about. You know, he felt like the law was closing in on him, possibly the cartel, things like that. But that documentary just kind of runs with him at the very tail end of his life in a very sad depiction of him. But I was with him during the apex of his entire career, I would say, even overshadowing the McAfee antivirus and stuff.
And how did it come about? How do you end up being security guard for John McAfee?
Oh, it was crazy. So I retire out of the Navy SEALs and I get out, and you would think after a successful career that I would be like this, you know, I would have it together, right? But I was a broken man. I was broke physically from combat deployments. I was broken mentally up here from being investigated, a lot like Eddie Gallagher. And then I was broke financially, man, speaking.
Wow.
And so I had $4,000 in the bank. I think I had like $4,000 at the time. And I had a $3,800 mortgage payment coming up, my VA mortgage loan, man. And so I was stressing. My body's hurting. I'm like walking up the stairs of my house, and I could hear my knees cracking.
Yeah.
My bones like grinding together, man. And I'm just like, dude, I just sacrificed my whole life for what I believed at the time, my country. and I put all in, right? Lost good friends over there. And now I'm just like this broken, worn out, empty, lost ship in the night. And I was even considering, I had those crazy intruding thoughts that so many of our veterans have, like of killing myself. And it was a very dark time. And during that time, my buddy called me, a TCAF, French 4 Legion guy, SEAL guy. And he was like, hey bro, do you know John McAfee? And I was like, I don't know him. He's like, check your computer screen. And you know, the McAfee antivirus.
Yeah.
And so he said, John McAfee's going to call you. You know, he said he wants the best SEAL out there. Well, I wasn't the best SEAL. I had just got out. You know, it's all timing, right?
Right.
And I was like, well, why not? You know? And so literally, man, little did I know that, you know, 1 year after that phone call with McAfee and going and abruptly leaving everything, including my wife, everything, the home, and going up there and living with him for 24 hours a day for the next 2 years. Little did I know, within a year from that moment of that broken place, I would be a millionaire, but it also would cost me so much more down the road, you know?
You gotta tell me more about this now. You're gonna leave everybody hanging on that one.
I know.
So, all right, so you leave, so you're a broken man and you leave to go do this. And then now all of a sudden you said a year later you're a millionaire, but you said a lot of that is not good.
Just like this, just a millionaire like this. No, but seriously, like when you feel so lost like that, and you're looking. They say PTSD, right? Is another form of just grieving. And so I was basically, Manning, I was grieving the loss of brotherhood, of unity, of a team of some sort. And so when I got to McAfee, here there was these Green Berets guarding. Here McAfee was like this father figure to men and women out there. You know, his voice is very compelling. He's highly influential. Everything he would say. You know, he's a libertarian. He had all these reasons why we shouldn't pay taxes and why we're stupid for paying taxes. All this different stuff, right? Which got him in a lot of trouble. But he had this fatherly figure of persona about him. And naturally, when these guys don't have a son, I come in, interstage left. I start protecting him. He's entrusting me with his life. Now he's paying my bills, right? And I took it serious, man. If he told me that that he was getting abducted by aliens every night, I would take him dead serious because I was dead serious about my job, you know?
He was doing a lot of drugs at the time, right?
He was doing crazy stuff. I never saw him do an actual drug, but like, it's very important. He was extremely smart.
But was he doing it though?
Well, it's crazy.
Because I guess you don't know.
Well, like
if you didn't see him.
Like I found a massive bag of white powder in his room and rolled up $100 bills all over. But when they tested it, it wasn't like cocaine, it wasn't meth, but he was mixing that powder with another powder. So everything he was doing was legal, like nootropics and all that stuff.
Okay.
But then he would mix it. But he was also just out of control at times. Like he knew how to make meth, how to make crack. Like he would talk about it and stuff. So you're going, okay, I got you, you know, and sometimes he'd have guys go buy Benadryl, a lot of Benadryl from the pharmacies. I'm just going, come on, man.
Yeah, you're definitely doing something shady.
Yeah. And so he was definitely delving in all kinds of stuff, man. But during my time with him, I took it really serious. I don't think a lot of the other guys took him serious. But one of the most profound things he ever told me was when I first met him, brother. I showed up. He's got these massive attack dogs, and he brings me outside, and he just stares me dead in my face, and he goes, you know, who's the most feared man on the battlefield? And he's strapped with like guns, and I mean, he had like a 1911, like a Mac-10. Like it was overkill, right? For me being in the SEALs, I was like, come on, bro, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But he looks me dead in the eyes, man, and he just commanded your presence and your attention. And he said, who's the most feared man on the battlefield? And I said, I don't know, sir. And he was like, it's the oldest man. Do you understand me? And after he said that, I just took him at his word. Like he seemed kind of like a scary, manipulative guy with all kinds of little tricks in his hat, right? And so I took him real serious. He saw that, and he demanded the utmost loyalty around him. And if you were slightly off just one day, he would fire you like that fast.
Right.
And so I kind of went
Probably didn't trust anybody, right?
He didn't trust anyone.
Anybody, right.
He didn't trust Janice, his own wife. You know, it was a wild time in his house. Like he was shooting guns inside the house. And for me, that's like almost no-go criteria, right? But I had to pay the bills at the time.
Yeah.
But then I started to really get involved with him, really like him, you know. And then I became like a son to him. And that's when he took me in pretty short notice and started teaching me everything that he knew or that I could learn with the fire hose of business information. And so he taught me everything I knew about business, know now, and taught me about crypto, taught me about blockchain technology. I was reading I read hundreds of white papers and started doing his negotiations for him, started doing all of his business deals, started making him a ton of money. And John always called me his lucky charm. And so, and you know, I'm Irish, he's Irish. and so he would call me his lucky charm because I made him a ton of money. But I knew the truth. For me, it was just like, it was timing. I came in at the right time. And he was just highly influential. So whatever he said on his million-person Twitter account, just 75% of them would do what he said. Like, you know, like, I like this crypto. He doesn't even have to tell you to invest in it. People are just going to flood in and buy it. So I was picking out the coins for him. We were doing the coin of the day. Then I was doing negotiations on cruise ships and keynote speaking events.
So was all the business stuff, was it all directed to crypto?
All of the
or blockchain like stuff?
Yeah, blockchain, ICOs, cryptocurrency, but the majority of it, people just wanted the McAfee name behind their product. But there was also a ton of scams. Crypto is just rife, especially back in 2017. It was rife with scams, all kinds of different
Now, are you saying scams in terms of like was he participating in the scams too? Or
No.
you're saying there were scams, so he actually was one of the ones not doing scams?
Well, there was all kinds of different companies that were just total fake because it was so new, these crowdfunding and stuff. And so they're coming up with all these different ideas like telemedicine on this app, but you pay in this certain no BS coin or whatever it is. They have these crazy names for all these altcoins, right?
Right.
They called them shit coins. And so there was a lot of scams. And at the time, I didn't believe McAfee was doing anything shady, right? I come from military. I retired out of the military. I go right into this, right? And so I look at him kind of as a commander in chief too. You know, what he says goes. And plus there wasn't any rules in crypto at the time. And so I justified our dealings as there was no rules involved. And if you're playing the game, like if you're investing a ton of money in this cryptocurrency, okay, at that time, you were very savvy at crypto. Like you knew exactly what it's not the old lady sitting at the computer, and then all of her money disappears.
Right.
No, you had to be extremely intelligent at cryptocurrency and trading to play that type of game that he was playing.
And when you say you were negotiating, like what type of stuff were you negotiating?
Well, we would go on like these blockchain cruises, right? And McAfee was just like a rock star. And so these people, these different cryptocurrency companies, blockchain technology companies would come on board these ships or meet us in Thailand at his big keynote speaking, or Ibiza, Spain, Russian oligarchs. Like I'm talking like all kinds of people.
So he spoke a lot? He
spoke a lot. He came in, but he would speak for free. He didn't charge anything.
Okay.
He liked him and Janice and maybe me and another guy to fly for first class, you know, put him in a nice hotel.
Right.
But he would come for free. And then all kinds of different companies would just line up. And it was very easy to do his negotiations for him because it was a very set parameters. You know, the easiest negotiation is non-negotiable. So I would sit there with a head boss or whatever their company was, and they would, you know, try to negotiate it down. And I'd be like, hey, listen, this is it, and I gotta go, man. like in 2 minutes, I got to meet this other CEO or founder over here.
Right.
And so it was really, he was a great businessman, It was pretty.
So he basically told you like, look, this is the deal. I just need you to be the voice to get it done.
Yeah, and I was nervous at first. I was like, you don't understand. I don't think I can do this. I don't know. He goes, dude, just you got this, Jimmy. He had a lot of faith in me, and he allowed me to make mistakes. And so I just started running this whole company and just running his entire business, everything from, recruitment and manning to getting him marketing deals and getting him big business deals with ICOs and in the blockchain companies.
Now, is that stuff you can put on your resume now, or is that stuff that's like people are like, nah, I can't?
Well, I mean, I was eventually arrested with John, you know, and
so before you get into that, tell me like, and I'm sure there's a lot, and I'm sure like this entire podcast could be about your whole McAfee thing, but like, give us one of the like most memorable, like absolutely most memorable moments that you have with him. I'm sure there's a lot, so I know I'm putting you on the spot.
There's so many.
There's so many, but is there anything that like really, really stands out to you?
There's the John McAfee that people saw out there, right? Like out there in the public, like if they believe like, man, this guy's off his rocker. He's crazy. And then there's the guy that I knew, right? Who seemed to be almost like on the evil side of things sometimes, but then this super nice guy, right? But he told me,
was he bipolar?
No, he's just a genius, and a bored genius, like way too smart for his own good. I think
because hearing you say evil and then nice, that's like
I know
crazy to say in two, know what I mean? But that's a description in my eyes to like manipulative geniuses, because they can be very evil, but then they can also make you feel, because I've had experiences with con artists. So actually, I mean, crazy that I actually trained 2 con artists, and if they walked in right now, they would be that you would think they're the coolest
dudes in the world,
like dopest, like, you know what I mean,
bro.
So I feel like that's what I'm kind of like picturing in my head, is just somebody that they're like your dog, they're your boy, because they're so good with people. But then they're hidden agendas on the side. So then you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So,
well, what was scary about McAfee, which is different, okay? There's the con artist. And McAfee would talk about con artists. He goes, Jimmy, the reason why they call him a con artist is because they build confidence in you.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
And I was like, he would break it down elementary, right?
Right.
But the 2 guys that I ever said I would die for, and the most trusted guys that I ever knew in my life, turned out to be the biggest con men that I've ever known in my life. And it was during that time with McAfee. And I've noticed that in my life, some of the most trustworthy guys that I've ever met in my life, especially in the crypto world and stuff, not necessarily in the SEALs, it's everywhere, right? But in that brotherhood, but some of the most trustworthy guys I've ever met were absolute dirtbags who would steal everything from you, including your wife. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
you met them through McAfee.
And I met them while I was at McAfee. But
you wouldn't put him in that category, is what you're saying.
But I wouldn't put him in that category because McAfee, you knew something was up.
Okay.
You knew McAfee had a no bluff policy. That's, I wrote some of his top 10 things down. And one of his things he told me, from the very get-go of teaching me about business, he said, Jimmy, I have a no bluff policy. He goes, do not ever, ever, ever bluff anyone. Let your yays be yays and your no's because, so you knew he's not conning you.
Right.
But he had other ways to manipulate the situation to whatever he wanted it to be. I got some cool stories, but you asked me about, okay, the craziest story, McAfee had 2 near-death crazy stories. The first one, he was working on the railroad, and as he had already done, the McAfee antivirus went later on, but as he was doing other stuff, working at NASA, working on the railroad systems that we know, the very complex software that they still use today, McAfee invented that basically.
Oh, wow.
But he invented it while he was high on drugs. He was basically doing crazy drugs, right? And he was in Brazil or Mexico or somewhere, and I'll never forget this. We're in his truck driving back to his Lexington, Tennessee home, and he told me the story. He said, son, he always called me son. He said, son, I got so high one time, I was permanently fried. And he goes, I had done some orange powder, a big line of orange powder. They only told me to do just a few little granules of it. He goes, but it didn't work. And so I waited 15 minutes. And so I snorted the other part of the line. He says, after he snorted that line, he says, son, I was sitting on my couch in this house in Brazil. He said, and all of a sudden I'm sitting on top of the moon in a rocking chair, just rocking. And I look over the moon into the earth, and I can see myself sitting in this apartment, just sitting there on the couch, just permanent fried. He said for the next year of his life, he was like incoherently, permanently fried. In fact, so bad that he had to move back in with his mom and his wife was there, and he could hear them at one point literally boxing his stuff up, and he could see it happening. And they were talking about admitting him forever into a mental ward. He's permanently fried right now while they're doing this.
Do you know what drug it was?
I have no idea.
You said orange powder.
It was orange powder for anybody out there who knows.
Yeah.
So check this out. He's watching them pack up all of his stuff. They're labeling it, and they're talking as if he can't hear him, because he can hear him, but he can't communicate. He said sometimes he would black out and find himself hitchhiking down the road or just sitting in another person's car and talking to them, or they would be talking to him. He said it was really scary, and he knew he was screwed. He said, so as they're boxing up his stuff, he said a voice came to him, and it said, murder your mom and your wife. Murder them now. And so he said, sounds like a plan. Okay. And so he goes and he somehow finds a shotgun, a 20 gauge pump shotgun. And he said he was walking up to the house with the 20 gauge shotgun. And he said he opened up the screen door, and his mom is there and his wife is there. And he's about to shoot them both dead. He says, and then he heard a voice and it said, hey, sir. And he looked over and he said there was a guy with a little bow tie with a white shirt and a book, a Bible, on a bike, I believe it was. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, can I talk to you about Jesus? And
it's just in my mind, I was thinking, is this somebody from the Book of Mormon or something?
Yeah. He says, can I talk to you about a man named Jesus? And McAfee was really funny. He was always like this. He goes, yeah, sure, why not? Like the voice told him to go murder his family. Sure, why not? So he goes, sure, why not? And so he leans the shotgun against the door of the house, and then he sits in this swing with this guy. And he said, son, for the next 2 hours, this man spoke to me about the most fascinating man that I've ever heard about in my life, this guy called Jesus. And he said, when he was done telling me this fascinating story, the man said, can I pray for you? And he obviously saw that John needed desperate help.
Right.
And John said, sure. And he grabbed John's hand and he said he prayed for John. And he said the moment the guy was done with his prayer, John McAfee literally snapped out of his permanent fry. At this point...
So it sounded like he had a dance with the devil and a dance with Jesus, like literally.
Yeah, and this point, brother, I was literally kind of shocked because I believed in God, right? I wasn't following God, but I knew that Jesus... And I was shocked because I didn't know McAfee believed in Jesus. So I said, after his story, I said, sir, I had no idea you believed in Jesus. He said, I don't. And I said, but you were permanent fried.
Right.
And that guy prayed for you and he spoke about Jesus. He goes, yeah, I know it's weird, but it doesn't mean I believe in Jesus. Wow. I just said he was a fascinating guy. I said, but I was so confused at that.
That is confusing.
Yeah, very confusing.
Yeah. And he didn't really give you a reason. He just said,
no, he said it doesn't
he didn't really see it as a miracle.
It wasn't proof enough for him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And it was, just so I fully understand this, that was just his mind, right? Like there was no real person in a bow tie, right? He was just imagining that.
No, that was a real guy.
Oh, it was a real person.
That was a real dude with a real Bible that came
and
over
saw him with a gun, with a shotgun,
and saw him walking in the house with a shotgun and said, "Hey, sir, can I talk to you?"
Kind of sounds like an angel, though. You know what I mean?
That's the story he said, man.
That's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
And the fact that he doesn't believe in Jesus now.
No,
it's like, come on.
Yeah,
and then what's the second one?
Okay, the second one, man. Thank you for.
And by the way, like, it was funny because before this, I just heard Joe Rogan talking about McAfee and saying that they should do a movie on his life. And that being said, I think you should write a book on your experience and that could turn into a movie. So, brother, just throwing that out there right now.
Well, thank you for saying that, man. Thank you for throwing
because you have a perspective that very, very few people had. For 2 years, you were literally right by his side and having these intimate moments that nobody else, like you were in the car, by yourself when he was telling that story?
All the time. Maybe the driver in his guards. I was by his side.
These are fascinating stories.
Dude, this next one's crazy. And so, So in fact, McAfee wouldn't even sleep unless I was like super close to him. The door had to be cracked open. I had to be on the couch in the hotel, and you couldn't even come up to the door. I had to be with him all the time, and you can imagine how draining this was.
I mean, that sounds horrible.
Hence the divorce
to anybody. Like, I don't care if you were guarding a saint. Like, that's still a lot on you. And then just the demanding. It's your life. You're saying that I'm gonna give up my life for another human being. It's basically what you're saying. It
was 24 hours a day, and he was giving up everything. But as we're going along, I go from 500 a day to 700 to 1,000 to making 20,000 every couple of days in these negotiations deals. And so the money lured me in.
Right.
And I can remember that. I just remembered that dark place that I was in right after the SEALs getting out. And I remembered how broken I was. And now I felt like I was up on this mountain, like the palace, the peak. McAfee would just, I remember a Bentley pulling up, a brand new Bentley pulled up, and the guy got out and he said, are you Jimmy Watson? I said, yes, you're here for John McAfee. Yes. He goes, no, I'm here for Jimmy Watson. I said, no, you're not. You're here for John McAfee. And he goes, no, I'm supposed to give these keys to you. And the title, he said, sign right there. And I was nervous and shaking. And I went to John McAfee and said, I'm not signing this. And he says, no, it's yours now, son. And it's yours, son. And he would give me, he said, you like this truck? It was $70,000 aftermarket in this getaway truck with this grill, these sirens. And he said, you love this truck, huh? And I said, sir, this truck is bad to the bones. And he goes, it's yours now. Like stuff like that, throwing me the keys. And so you can imagine how I was all in no matter what.
That keeps you going.
No matter what.
Yep. And so what's the second story?
So the second story, and by the way, I'm doing a book, man. I'm working a deal right now.
Okay, good.
And because there's some message that needs to be put out, and it's not being put out because nobody really knew him, right?
Right.
Nobody was close to him. So the second story, I think equally as crazy, is I leave. The only time I ever left John McAfee was one time in a year period, okay? And I went to take Janice, because he trusted me, and his wife, to the airport. I took her to the airport. I come back, but it only took me 2 hours to go there and drop her off. I come back. I ask where John is, and his guards, he always had bodyguards with assault weapons everywhere. And now they're calling me boss because I'm running the show. And I was like, where's John? Where's Mr. McAfee? And they said, he's in his room. And I was like, what'd y'all do today? Because it was weird. And because he's always up. And they said, well, we went on the boat and we partied. And so I said, okay. And so I went over to the door. I cracked it open. I opened the door and cracked it open. And he's just butt naked. And he's sprawled out like this. And I'm like, whoa. And so I closed the door. So I closed the door. And then I laid down just like I always do on the couch. In the morning, he always would bust through the door and say, get up, give me a cigarette. Smoking his cigarette backwards, drinking scotch. And I would just jump up and we would go all day, right? And he didn't do that. And so I was glad. But I saw the door cracked open now a little bit. I said, that's weird. And so I laid there till about 9 o'clock. And then I got up because something wasn't right. And I walked over to the door and I like cracked it open, and he was in the same position, like sprawled out like this, in the same position, and he was black and blue. All of his body was black and blue, and he was making this noise like this, like like a drowning victim. I had
Right.
seen this in drowning victims and stuff. And so I ain't freaked out in combat. I always kept it cool, cool under pressure. But for some reason, that freaked me out. And I could barely get my thoughts together. I ran over there. I picked his really super heavy body up off. He was sunk down in the bed, gasping. I put him down on the ground. He had urinated himself. It was really hard to understand. Called the ambulance. He was life flighted out. I'm screaming. They life flight him out to the hospital, right? And they put him on like life support, like literally the tubes, the machine breathing for you. His hands are tied down to the bed. And that's worst case scenario for a guy like John McAfee. Worst case.
Right.
Because he's so paranoid and he's restrained now. But he's out of it. And they're like, Jimmy, we don't know what he did. They thought he induced drugs. They thought I was lying about it. Like, what drugs did he take? And I said, I don't know. And but the drug test came back negative with some he had THC in his body. And so 3 days, I hold his hand. I'm like crying. I'm like by his side because I love the guy,
right.
and I don't want him to die because it's over. Everything's over. He's over. And he was this incredible storyteller. He's told these stories all the time. And I was thinking, God, even if he comes back, they said he's going to be brain damaged. He's going to have brain damage. He's not going to be able to tell these stories ever again, nothing, And so 3 days goes by, and all of a sudden, brother, he makes a noise, and he starts moving around and starts, his hands, and he wants to yank that tube out. And so he wakes up, long story short, he demands they take it out of his throat with the little, it takes him forever to write this thing, I got a little thing up there and he's doing squeegee. They take all the tubes out against the doctor's advice. All this stuff comes out of his lungs. They're afraid they're going to collapse. He comes back he starts doing card tricks, starts telling his normal jokes. He's perfectly fine. And so, of course, the first thing I do, and when we're alone, I said, sir, did you see anything? Because he was out for that long.
Right.
I said, did you see anything? And he said, don't ever ask me that again. And I said, Roger that. Well, a couple of days later, he said, come here, I want to tell you something. And I came and sat down next to him. And he said, son, I was hovering across, and he was shook up. His voice is cracking. He said, I was hovering across the ocean, just this glass, like at light speed, just endlessly. He said, and I looked down, and as I looked down, all these terrible faces were coming up out of the water in his hands in the ocean, thousands and thousands of people. And he says, all the dark colors of the world were in that water, the dark blue, black, brown, murky, all this stuff. And his hands are coming up, and they were coming up, and I was being drawn into them, and they were going to pull me in underneath. He says, and suddenly, he says, I looked up, and he goes, all the most beautiful pastels and colors that you could ever imagine were in the sky. The blues, the turquoise, the purple, the yellows up in the sky. He said, and there was this massive white clouds. He says, and as I'm being pulled under, I looked up, he said, and these clouds just kind of parted. He says, and a light came down, a white light, and it said, come up here, it's time. And he said, it scared him. He says, I didn't care about that anymore. He goes, that didn't scare me, the hands and the faces. He goes, whatever that was that called me up because it was my time to be judged, he says, that scared me so bad that I told myself, wake up. And he just started screaming, wake up, wake up. And that scared him so bad that he woke up in the hospital. It wasn't the stuff down there. Right. It was his time to go up.
Wow. That's wild.
And so guess what I said? I said, sir, do you believe now? Mm-hmm. And he said, no.
Wow.
And I just couldn't believe it.
And did you ever figure out what got him in that state?
No. I don't know.
To be black and blue and barely breathing, that's wild.
He said he was poisoned by the Russians or something. He felt like when he put on his sandal or shoe, there was a prick in his toe. And he said that was one way that The Russians would poison people.
Wasn't there something in Running with the Devil about him being poisoned or something? I think. I don't know.
Dude, they didn't cover this in the documentary.
Yeah.
I just can't even believe it.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I didn't. I've
these
never heard any
personal
of it.
stories, they don't cover none of this.
Well, they probably don't know. Maybe. I mean,
They don't know, or they've interviewed just so.
because I mean, you said so he had like a team of protectors around him. You were kind of the boss, but other than you and his wife, there weren't too many people he engaged with in his inner circle, right?
No, he didn't engage with nobody.
Yeah.
Zero.
It was only business, but then when he came home, it was just him. And he had to move around a lot too, right? At one point in time, like a lot, right?
Bro, we moved 6 times in 1 year, 6 times. Like, short moves. But one thing about him is he would literally have these antiques in his house. He had this 2,000-year-old Buddha statue that I almost knocked over one day. And because it was in his garage. He got a bunch of his stuff back from Belize and stuff. And so I'm in his garage, and all of a sudden he just says, "Hey, pack your stuff. Let's go." And I said, "Where are we going, sir?" And he said, "Just grab your stuff. We're moving." And I said, "Okay, I'll start coordinating the move of this mansion he's in. He's in this massive house with these artifacts, this all gold stuff, statues." And he goes, "No, son, you didn't hear me. Like I said, we're leaving now." And I'm like, no freaking way.
So he left everything.
So he literally, McAfee had no attachments to anything. And that was another very interesting thing about him. He had 0 attachments to Lambos. He would laugh at Lamborghinis, laugh at these cars. He had 0 attachments to possessions. And that's how he grounded himself. And so he had this little bag with a hole in it. And man, sometimes it stunk. He just wore the same pants over and over until Janice would make him wash his pants, like straight up.
Yeah.
And then he would just grab his bag, and you were either with him or you're against him. And so I would just be like, oh my God. So I would grab all my stuff, and I'd say, "Sir, at least take the gold and the silver." He had these massive bag of silver. He goes, "Okay, if you can carry him." And I'm just dragging.
You're like, "I'm not leaving this."
I had attachments.
Yeah.
So I would be dragging his gold out and his silver, these
That's
massive
wild.
duffel bags. And that stuff's heavy, man.
And then how did all of this get you in trouble? So how did you end up?
Oh man. So me and McAfee split ways. All right.
Okay.
It's like a long story, right? But we split ways. And all of a sudden I hear that McAfee is arrested in Spain and thrown in some Spaniard prison. And it wasn't a shock to me because, that he was in Spain, but it was a shock that they arrested him. But I just kind of knew that was coming down the pipeline because McAfee was extremely vocal on all of his channels about how he didn't pay taxes. And I never caught him in one lie. Sometimes he would say stuff that was so audacious that there's no way you would believe it. But somebody would come along and verify it and tell the exact same story. And you're going, "Dude, I thought that was a lie."
Right.
And so he'd be like, "I told you so. I told you." And he's always telling everybody, "I told you that happened." And so when they arrested him, I figured it was for all of his tax evasion. And I was like, I guess that wasn't a lie. He literally stopped paying his taxes for 6 years and he owed millions of dollars. But his excuse was, "I already paid $80 million to the IRS. I'm not paying no more."
Right.
He goes, "Would you pay, Jimmy?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. That's kind of crazy." And so he gets arrested. And when he gets arrested, man, I just knew because of how close we were, because I was running his entire company as a CEO, I knew that it was over for me. I knew that like my time was coming, My parents are getting letters at the house, getting visitations from the FBI telling me. And so, man, I just skedaddled. I just bounced. And I went overseas. And man.
So you thought they were coming for you?
Yeah, I just knew it was coming. Like it didn't take, like it was common sense that like, look, I'm not going to answer their mail.
Did you feel like the money you made with him might have been illegal?
At the time, no, because the way it was done, it never even crossed my mind.
Were you paying your taxes?
Yeah, I was paying my taxes. I mean, I didn't even need to pay it. I was
just checking.
That's one thing I was doing. Right? I was like, I'm going to pay my taxes because, man, that was hard for me to do.
But I say that because, like, what made you think? Like, what made you run? Because you obviously had to think something. was like you were doing something wrong.
No, you know what made me run? Okay, and this is crazy, but what made me run is that I had already had a massive interaction with the FBI from Blackwater when I was a team leader. I was a team leader of the Nisar Square, Baghdad's Bloody Sunday. They related it to the My Lai massacre, right? And so the 4 guys that I was in charge of, okay, they go to prison. Trump, this is how political it is. Trump pardons those 4 guys, right? I had immunity, okay? When they gave me immunity after I refused to talk for years, when they gave me immunity, I was in sniper school in the SEALs. I had to go testify. The way I testified was not compatible with their story, with the DOJ, the FBI story. They hated me from that moment on. Okay. And so,
because they were lying.
Well, because they
fabricated the story.
Well, their story didn't match up with mine, and I was there, you know.
But that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So then that means they made up the story because you were there and you knew what happened.
I don't know. I honestly, still to this day, don't know why they act the way they do, or I don't see how it's possible. For instance, the FBI went over to investigate the Nisar Square, right? Now, keep in mind, my team wasn't a bunch of bloody Comanche warriors out there just taking scalps, man. We're out there doing a mission, defending others, saving National Guard teams, saving Marines, saving Army guys in this Blackwater group, right? And I'm in a counter assault team now. I'm in charge of 30 guys in the assault team in a quick reaction force, okay? And we're going out and saving people. We're going out and, yeah, you're going to get in massive engagements if you're doing 5 to 8 runs out the red zone every single day.
Right.
You know, and it was bad. I had already got shrapnel. I knew my time was coming. I was surprised I hadn't died yet, man. And so I knew it was going to be bad, right? And just to put it in perspective, when the FBI went to Iraq, Baghdad, to investigate the Nisar Square, they couldn't even leave their rooms to investigate our war crimes because rockets were coming in and pounding them. So does that not give you a perspective of kind of what's going on in our nation right now?
Oh, that's crazy.
It's hypocrisy, right? It was bad. And so I had already had a massive run-in. I had already had a pretty rogue FBI agent send a memo that was lying to my SEAL command, saying that I lied on the stand when I testified. Mm-hmm. They were saying I lied. Well, if I lied, they would have got me for perjury.
Right.
And I was my lawyer was Monica Lewinsky's lawyer, Preston Burt. Yeah, he was paid by Blackwater Insurance, long story short. But anyways, they tried to ruin my SEAL career. They tried to ruin my SEAL career. And this is not just me, man. You know, when you're going through painful stuff in life, you compartmentalize and you just start shrinking under the pressure and you think, man, woe is me. I'm the only person in the world going through this hell right now. But little did I know later on when I won my case and retired out of the SEALs, which everybody thought was impossible after they came after me. Well, I started meeting other SEALs that this happened to, good friends of mine. A lot of dudes, like look at Eddie Gallagher, very similar story happened to that SEAL, right? And so a lot of guys were getting cold. The best sheepdogs are getting cold right now. And it's all part of the corrupt system that we're in. Mm-hmm. And it's literal recruitment for our military is down 42% right now. You can't even get a warrior to join now because you have a transgender agenda and inclusion and diversity and all this stuff. And so they're taking out all the warriors. The borders are being flooded by military aged men, mm-hmm. right? And I'm telling you, man, we're in for trouble. But I saw this coming 15 years ago, man.
Right.
In the fight of my life when they came after my SEAL career. But I won that. I got out honorably, whatever that means. And I got out and so to answer your question.
So it sounds like the reason was more of your previous experience with the FBI. And so you knew that you were running from something they could make up.
Yeah, and whether or not they were related, yeah. I often say, guys, how many guys do you know personally who have been literally 2 massive battles with the FBI on 2 different unrelated fronts. And I made sure I mentioned that to the DOJ when they first arrested me. I said, guys, don't you guys think this is crazy? How, I'm the Blackwater dude, right? Y'all went after my SEAL career. You lost there, right? And now, in a completely unrelated incident,
right.
I'm getting just arrested by 15 FBI agents in Dallas, Texas.
So where'd you flee to?
For cryptocurrency.
Where did you flee to originally?
I left to where did I go first? Colombia, Medellin, Colombia.
Okay.
I did mercenary stuff out of there in Nicaragua, San Salvador, Mexico. Lived in Thailand. Started doing Muay Thai in Thailand. And so for 2 years, man.
I was about to say, how long was this span? 2
So
years?
this is 2 years I stay abroad.
Wow.
Okay, 2 years of anxiety, of just torn up. From,
Like looking over your shoulder a lot.
Yeah. My departure from McAfee was all jacked up. He was like a dad figure to me. So I'm having all those issues. And then I'm like, how could this be? Like, how could I be going through another thing with the FBI? Like, I'm just like blown away, right? And I don't even know what it's about. Like, cause I'm still thinking I don't know what I could have done that was so bad for the FBI to arrest me, right? I didn't understand how conspiracy works and a leader of a company like that under the guy that they're really trying to go after. And so if McAfee was number 1, man, I was number 2, right? And they needed me to put McAfee away for life. And so my parents keep getting mail and keep telling me, I'm like, don't tell me, I don't want to know. I'm not on the run, technically, but I'm not answering, right? And I'm staying way away. And I'm also, but I was lost, man. Like I'm overseas. I've got a death wish, basically. I tell people that often. I'm just embracing death. Like I don't care. Like I'm doing pretty wild stuff. I'm on my off time. I'm partying. I'm on 3-day coke benders.
It's crazy. Like you and Sean Ryan got to get together.
Man,
his story is.
I don't even know his story.
There's some similarities.
That's crazy.
He went down to Medellin and like built his own like whole cocaine situation. Like I don't know. I don't want to speak on it, but like, and he was in a dark place for a while too. So do you think that stems from? So I had an opportunity to train a rock star one time, and he was explaining to me like you get to this level where you're performing in front of stadiums, right? Like hundreds of thousands of people, screaming your name. And then when you're done with it, you lose that. So then you lose you.
Bro, Do
you think that that's like when you become a Navy SEAL and y'all go through what you go through and then it stops, you kind of miss the adrenaline and the
absolutely it's validation seeking, right? And I coach guys now. I run my big men's group stuff, and I'm always telling guys, if you're having a problem in life, if you're having an issue with your wife, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but every time I remember to do this every day, every time I get my feelings hurt of anything, anger, greed, pride, ego. All this stuff is coming from seeking validation in all the wrong person, place, or thing, right? Mm-hmm. But when we seek validation from the only one who can give us validation, the Father in heaven, he's the only one. Masculinity, strength is masculinity. Right. He's the only one that can validate us. I believe this, and I've felt this. And anytime I'm seeking it from him, nothing phases me anymore, right? It took me years to learn this and years to mold into this like sword, right? And so, but before that, look at my career. Like you talk about seeking validation, man. Seeking titles, Marine Corps, Blackwater, SEALs, mercenary now, Muay Thai, like always chasing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like chasing the crowd again. I wanted the crowd to cheer me on, the man in the arena. But at the end of the day, it left me just hopeless, man. And it left me in a very dark place in my life, man. And so I always tell people, the FBI told me that too. They said all outlaws come home, Jimmy, to see their mom one last time, like John Dillinger, So I was like, dang it. And so, I went against my own strategy, my own rules, art of war, and I went home to see my mom. I wanted to see her one last time.
Right.
And before I left for good forever. And that was hard to see my mom and to be thinking I'm never going to see her again and say goodbye. But that wasn't the case. I had coffee with her and I told her goodbye, shed some tears. And then all of a sudden, man, I had this peace come about me. And I even told my mom, the last thing I told my mom before I was arrested by these 15 FBI and Dallas SWAT team, I said, Mom, everything's going to be okay. I just had this peace come across me. I'm not taking Xanax or anything right now. I just had this peace come across me.
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, maybe somebody's praying. And man, that's when the FBI just blasted me, bro. And
literally at that moment?
At that moment, I get up. I tell her that. I get up. We walk maybe 50 feet. And right as we're up to the car, and man, this SUV, this black SUV, just pulls up, slams on its brakes. The guy's got a gun in my face. And he's like, are you Jimmy Watson? He yelled that. And I was like, yeah. And they said, get on the ground. They were sweating and yelling and screaming. I got on the ground. He's sweating all over me, man. Yanked my, wrenching my arms back. And I just kept telling him, chill out, bro. Calm down, And I wanted my mom out there, and she videotaped it. But yeah, they put me in the car. He told me, Jimmy, it's over, man. You've lived a crazy life. And if you make it through all this, you need to either grow tomatoes or write a book. And I can't grow tomatoes, so doing the book thing.
And what do they charge you with?
So I didn't know at first, and I didn't know they could just transfer you to a federal penitentiary. Like for me, I didn't have a court. I wasn't arraigned. I literally was arrested because they considered me, SEAL and they considered me armed and dangerous. I'm not here to bash the FBI. I'm not here to bash law enforcement. I love law enforcement. I've worked hand in hand with FBI and the SEAL teams. Like I've literally worked with them. So I don't ever blame the guy, right? And they're just doing their job. They get a message down from the DOJ, hey, this guy's armed and dangerous, and he's a flight risk. He's a SEAL. Oh man, bring out the army.
The big dogs, yeah.
I wasn't even the big dogs. And I wasn't even armed. And so they put me in the car. They were real chill after that. They were like, how many pull-ups can you do and stuff? And I was like, take these handcuffs off and I'll show you. So they transfer me to some county, stay there a night, and then the very next day, 2 FBI come and grab me, and then transfer me straight to FMC, Fort Worth Medical Center. And that's every level of offender is held there because it's a medical center there. Okay. I didn't know anything about penitentiaries or nothing. But the Tiger King was in the pod next to me. So I'm staying in this place, man. They put me in solitary for 4 days because of COVID, and they ran out of cell rooms. And so
this was in 2020?
This is in 2020.
Oh, wow.
I believe this is 2020. And then I win my case to be transferred out and just put on house arrest. I got to sign a $5 million promissory bond.
But you still don't know what you're charged for?
Okay, yeah. So about
when did you know why the hell they arrested you?
So I stayed a couple days in solitary, and I'm thinking, don't I get a phone call or something? But I'm in solitary.
Or an explanation.
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Yeah. And I one of the FBI kind of briefly told me, you know why you're arrested, right? And I was like, no, man, I didn't do anything. Like the typical guy on cops, But when I was in the solitary, after a couple of days, my lawyer came down there. My lawyer actually came down, Arnold Spencer in Dallas, if you need a really good criminal lawyer. And he met me in this dungeon area, man. It was like a dungeon down there. And man, I was like, I'm like, get me out of here. He goes, it doesn't work like that. It's a process now. He says, you've been charged with 8 felonies. And I'm like, what? 8 felonies? What? And I'm like screaming. He's like, chill out. He goes, it's conspiracy to commit fraud, money wire fraud, money laundering. I'm like, Arnold, I don't know how to, what's this money? I never sent money wire fraud. Well, if it's derived from an action that's considered to be theft, from the boss man, and I send one text to my wife in Texas and ask her to send it to my USAA bank, USA canceled me after that, that's considered money.
So basically it was kind of like guilty by association.
Wire fraud. Yeah.
Like because of McAfee's dealings and you were kind of controlling it, you were getting in trouble because of the stuff he was doing.
Yeah. And I don't want to I don't want to push off the blame here. Like I literally was doing his bidding. Like, hey, you want me to liquidate $1 million in crypto? I can do that easy. Me and my wife will do that. And so I would transfer to my checking account from different exchanges. One of the exchanges was in New York. And because I was dealing with that exchange, the crypto exchange, right? It was based, even the modem or whatever was based out of, the server was based out of New York. Well, because it was based out of New York, now the same guys, the Southern Manhattan District, basically the Navy SEALs of the Department of Justice were able to pick up my case in McAfee's and just come after us like sharks. And they don't lose,
Wow.
And so I had a bunch of felonies against me that I had to have explained. And I wasn't no choir boy, but for these particular charges, I was like, say again? Like, and I still don't understand some of them, but overall, they wanted to get me with conspiracy, which is about 15 years from my understanding, from what my lawyer said. And he said it was not looking good for me. And I had about a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting out of it.
So what's your current situation with your criminal situation?
Are
you totally
free? Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
They dropped the charges?
Yeah,
amazing.
So
you're on house arrest for a year and a half. Not knowing.
Yeah, not knowing anything. I mean, I'm going to prison. I'm thinking, and my lawyer's like, I paid my lawyer $50,000 to tell me, Jimmy, you are going to prison. The FBI doesn't spend this long on anybody, 2 years, and build this case and then let you off. You're going to prison for probably 15 years.
Jeez.
And
where were you living at this time?
In Dallas, Texas, with my mom and my dad. And thank God for them. I was just done anyways. And so, so I'm on house arrest, and then all of a sudden, my phone just blows up. I get all these texts like, John McAfee died, John McAfee died, John McAfee, and I'm like, what? And then my lawyer calls me, and he's like, Jimmy, John McAfee was found hung in his prison, supposedly. Once they verify that, this could change the circumstances of your case. And so, man, I'm like, at the time, I wasn't even praying to God to get out of prison or anything. I didn't understand the charges. It was explained to me a little bit on, and I was like, okay, I could see where you could think that was bad. I take full responsibility for some of that. But I ended up praying to God one night and crying out to God, and I get an opportunity while on house arrest, and the same day McAfee is found in his prison dead, I get an opportunity to go to this nonprofit, this Operation Restore Warrior. And while I was there,
Operation Restore Warrior, is that
Operation Restored
Warrior?
Restored Warrior,
okay.
501(c)(3).
Yeah.
And I don't even remember how I found out a bit about these guys, but man, I ended up getting a chance. The Texas judge allows me to come off house arrest with my big old ankle brace on. I go there for 3 days, man. And now this is when I am just radically changed forever. My whole life is flipped upside down in a good way. And this is where everything made sense. And man, I can't even tell you how stretched out to the max I was after my life, and then I fall out with McAfee, and then being on the run, and then being arrested. And I mean, they finally caught me. They hit me up. I'm going to prison, right? And so I get a chance to go to Operation Restore Warrior. And while I'm there, these two guys, and I don't know it's a Christian organization. I don't know anything about it. I show up with like 4 or 5 other guys. And these two guys sit across from me and ask if they can pray for me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just glad to be off house arrest for 3 days, you know? And so I'm sitting there, they start praying for me, man. And they asked me, they say, can you tell us a little bit about your life after they pray? And I said, yeah. And I tell them a little story like I'm telling you right now.
It's kind of hard to tell your story, a little bit of your story.
And I even was like, are you guys FBI agents? I was like, are you FBI? And so they're like, no, we're not FBI. This is what we do here.
Yeah.
And so I started telling them my story, Manny, and they stopped me like right dead sentence of my story. One of them, his name is Daniel. And he says, you skipped over part of your story. And I said, no, I didn't. And I was skipping over a part, but I didn't think it was meaningful. It was my time. It was a dark time in my life. It was right at the end with McAfee. And I used to walk. I used to walk outside, and these stars were hanging down in Ocracoke. It was overlooking a sound, his mansion. And I skipped over that part. And this guy leans in, he goes, no, you skipped over a part. And I said, no, I didn't, bro. Let's move on. And he was like, well, he goes, was that at the Love Boat or the Love Shack? Like, and I'm like, what the heck? And I lean in, and I'm like, well, I was like, what'd you say? And he said the nickname, not only the name of the house, but like the nickname that I called this place that I just didn't even tell him. And I'm like, what is this guy, some kind of psychic or something? Right. Like this is, and you know, people that go to psychics, like, I don't understand, because like they may tell you your birthday or your astrology and this and this and this, but when somebody tells you something very specific, like a nickname that you use, that'll get your attention, and it's actually scary.
Right.
It's not like you want to sit there and hear it out.
Right.
And so I was like, hey man, I say I'm like a fragile man right now, bro. And I say fragile men do crazy things. I don't know if you see the ankle bracelet on my skinny jeans right now, but I'm like on that level. And they were like, no, hear us out. And I said, well, if you know so much, man, I said, why don't you start talking? And I'm not going to say anything. If you know so much, if you just somehow pull it out of thin air, the nickname of this house that I was in with McAfee, then why don't you tell me more? And so he looked at the other guy and he nodded at him, and he just starts telling me about this period in my life that I kept secret. He told me about the house that I was in, the name of it. He talked about how you walk through the front double door, and there was a screen door and a jacuzzi on the right side. And he's walking me through this house. And I knew this house so well that
there's no way he could have known that.
Yeah. And as he's telling me this, I feel like kind of out of body experience, like surreal, like maybe I'm being recorded. Maybe this is a reality show. Like I'm like delusional. And so I'm like not grasping what he's doing. And I keep saying, I say, okay, that's not enough. Like, okay, whatever. You just walked me through. Well, what else? And I kept saying this. And he says, well, you walk up the stairs. Right before you walk up the stairs, there's an elevator. And it's got a fake door, a beautiful cherry door. And I'm like, yes, and I keep saying, and, because I'm just fascinated that he's able to just download like a video,
right?
Like the blueprints of this house. And he goes, there's an armory where you keep the weapons in, a gray door and another fake door. All the rooms are labeled with Greek coordinates, Latin lungs. And I'm just like, and he names off the rooms like Tahiti, Colombia, Africa, whatever, And I'm just like going like shocked, And I kept saying, tell me more. This is very important. I kept saying, tell me more. And I'm at the edge of my seat, and he walks me up to the top floor, and he says, there's a big ship steering wheel. And then he says, and it's overlooking this beautiful sound. He called it a sound, the Ocracoke Sound, where my office was. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And I'm getting angry. I'm like so just blown away, like, why is this happening to me? Like, how are you doing this? And then he says, and there were ships and boats that would come up to the side of the house. And that was true. There was a canal. And I mean, this is so accurate. And I remember the last time I said, tell me more, I got real angry and I yelled at him. He later said he was terrified of me. They didn't know what I was going to do. And I literally said, tell me more, like in his face.
Yeah.
And he said, there was a path that you used to walk down behind the house. And when he said when he said that, I just broke down, just bawling like a baby, snot coming out. And because he had identified a path that I walked down that nobody else knew about, bro, in the darkest place of my life. And he identified that one place where I never thought God would be and never thought Jesus could be. And he identified it with such pinpoint accuracy that I had no other choice or option in my life but to believe that there was a God. He did love me no matter all of my faults, no matter all my issues in this life, no matter all my problems, and no matter how dark it got in my life, no matter how alone that path seemed, because I was walking down that, that dark proverbial path in my life too, that he was there. He was recording everything. He saw everything, and he heard my cry. Like David said in the Bible, he heard this poor man's cry, and you answered him. And man, when he said that, I just kind of fell back in my seat and just bawled my eyes out like a baby for the first time in years. And I just let out all this stuff, man. And they said, "Can we pray for you?" And they leaned over, and I remember them saying, "And your left shoulder hurts too." And I'm like, yeah, at this point, what are you going to say? No, right. Like, I don't believe that can happen.
Right.
So I said, yeah. And believe it or not, they said that they saw a sword coming out my left shoulder. Wow. As crazy as that sounds. And I said, yeah, I had a lot of pain in my shoulder. And I can remember thinking, how can you get spiritual healing if you're in so much physical pain? Mm-hmm. I'm kind of distracted. And so they lean in, touch my shoulder, pray, and it goes away. My pain goes away like this. It's just these supernatural things happening. And I just, after that, man, I literally stood up out of that chair, and it was like a light had shone down on my life. And it was just a complete perspective change in my life. And from that moment on, man, I was on fire for God. And I literally kind of just ran out of that room in joy. Like you hear these stories of people getting sick. Because I was Lazarus in the tomb, man. I was dead, man. I was a dead man walking. I mean, might as well be dead, man. I was going to prison, all this stuff. And as I'm leaving the Operation Restore Warrior, the same guy that prayed for me, Daniel, he says, "Hey, I want to let you know, I see a big chessboard, and I hear checkmate, and your case is going to get dismissed." And now I believed everything up until that point. Because when a professional lawyer is telling you that you're going to prison, it's over, right? Yeah. And so I get home, and remember, he said, "Checkmate, your case is getting dismissed." So I go home, I don't get my hopes up, but I'm on fire now. I'm just like, "Mom, you won't believe what happened to me." And she thinks I went to some kind of church camp and did mushrooms, and I got to go report to my probation officer on house arrest. Right. She's like, "What have you done?" And I'm like, "No, you don't understand." And they even tell us they're like, "Don't go to your family and just spill the beans because nobody's going to believe you." And so, but I did, man. Right. I went because I was the guy that just run and tell the good news, right? And so I'm calling my buddies, bro, and I'm calling my SEAL buddies, and they were in shock. I mean, these guys wouldn't even say it. They were just like, "Whoa, bro, like, dang, that's crazy." And because it's hard to believe something like that, but it happened to me. So I get back on house arrest, man, and my lawyer calls me, and the very first thing he says, and it's not like right when I got back, but I let like maybe 2 weeks go by, and the lawyer doesn't call me. And my mom and dad are like, "Call the lawyer." And I now I'm hearing from God. I literally heard, wait, like one of those crosswalks. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. I heard that, and so I didn't do nothing, and it was really against how I used to. I used to just tackle all my problems, call my lawyer, fight, angry, all this stuff. Right. And I didn't do nothing. And the next call that I got from my lawyer, Arnold, was, "Jimmy," he goes, "Checkmate." And I said, "What'd you say?" What? And he said, "Checkmate." And I said, "That's what the guy said, Operation Restore Warrior, Jesus." He's like, "Dude, are you in a bar? Are you okay? Like, you're supposed to be on house arrest. A $5 million bond." And I said, "No." He goes, "Forget it." He goes, "It means your case is getting dismissed." Wow. And so my case was dismissed, man. it was a wild, wild journey to get to that point that I don't wish on anybody. I don't wish that on anybody in this life, to go down what I went through, and to have to go down that road. A lot of it was my own doing. A lot of it was a byproduct of what happened to me, and I take full responsibility for all my actions, good or bad. And there's been a lot of bad, there's been a lot of regret, but the main thing that I always go back to is that story of how Jesus Christ literally met me, saved my life. That guy literally came down and put me on blast and saved me. And ever since then, man, been rolling and going, man.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. What a story.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So
thank you, man.
what are you doing now? Like
What am I doing
you know
now?
what I mean? Like, so what year was that? Like when were you told that you were free?
So that was basically 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
It took a while to process out, you
Okay.
know. But during that time, man, and part of my quiet meditation time in the morning, Sun Tzu said, "Ere the battle is won in the general's temple." You win the battles before you ever walk out the door to go to the gym,
Correct.
to go do this, to make a business deal. You win that battle. And so that's what I was doing. I was spending a lot of time in meditation, in prayer. I was asking God to come in and give me downloads. And during that time, I literally would see and hear what to do. And so I opened up social media. It skyrocketed, what I consider to skyrocket, and thousands.
Were you just on social media, like telling your story?
Yeah, I just started. I didn't know how, but God had given me that download in Operation Store Warrior. He's going to use me like a lighthouse, a lighthouse into his people. And so I just started telling my experiences, super raw. Just be you, be real. And I would just be real. And I would just start, getting thousands of messages in my DMs, like literally thousands of people through TikTok. And I didn't know the distinction between TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. I just started with TikTok, and that was successful. And then just transferred over to Instagram and just started up on YouTube. But my message now, man, is for absolute breakthrough and hope for anyone who feels like a lost ship in the night. I do two things now. I do that elite coaching here in Miami. I live here now, and I'm doing my first ever get together in Miami here. It's basically like a hard reset for anyone who wants a day to calm down and just we're going to do some cool stuff. We're going to do the classroom work. We're going to do the beach work, the cold plunge, that SEAL mindset, and just for the ultimate breakthrough in their life. I do that one-on-one coaching now, and I have my Mighty Warrior Tribe where men are gathering from all over, and I do 2 calls a week with them. We're going to be meeting up with them. So anybody who from a businessman to an entrepreneur to somebody that just needs a hard reset in their life, man, that's what I'm all about. That's what I want to start here in Miami.
I love it. That's awesome, man. We definitely we'll collab on some stuff for sure. So,
absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, man, I appreciate it, man. This was, it was more than I even thought. So it was funny because I read your bio and I was like, man, this is a lot. And then you over delivered, in my opinion. You
thank you, man.
Very, you got to keep doing this, man. You said McAfee was a good storyteller. You're a great storyteller as well. And the main reason why is because it's authentic. So it's true. It's exactly what you went through. So you're just telling your authentic story, and it's coming across, and it's going to help a lot of people, because there are a lot of people that need men, that need godly men, that need masculinity in their life, that need to know how to tackle this life, and that they don't have to do it by themselves. I think that's us alphas. A lot of times we feel like we have to do everything on our own and by ourselves. And at the end of the day, we need men like us to we can rally, we can have a tribe, we can have people to support us. And that's what we need. So just keep doing it.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. And love what you're doing too, man. I watch all your stuff, so appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, man.
For having me on, man.
All right, awesome.